The Cathedral Crypt by John Wyndham. The past seems so close here, Clarissa said, as though she thought aloud. Somehow, it hasn't been allowed to fade into dead history. Raymond nodded. He did not speak, but she could see that he understood, and that he, like herself, felt the weight of antiquity pressing down upon this Spanish city. Half unconsciously she elaborated. Most of our cities strive for change. They throw away the past for the sake of progress. And there are a few, like Rome, truly eternal cities, which sail majestically on, absorbing change as it comes. But I don't feel that this city is quite like that. Here, the past seems arrogant, as if it were fighting against the present. It is determined to conquer all the new forces. Look at that, for instance. A car, new and glossy, was standing before the cathedral door. A priest blessed it with upraised hand while he murmured prayers for the safety of the travelers. "Commending it to the care of God and the charge of St. Christopher," Raymond remarked. "At home they say that the cars empty the churches. Here they even bring the car to church. You're right, my dear. The past is not going to give in here without a battle." The car, with its celestial premium paid, drove on its way, and with it went all signs of the 20th century. Late sunlight poured upon a scene entirely medieval. It flooded the cathedral's western face, turning it from gray to palest rose, showing it as something which was more than stone upon stone, a thing which lived, though it rested eternally. The fragile beauty of living things was built into those Gothic spears which sped heavenward. Such traceries and filigrees, such magnificent aspiration could not absorb men's art and lives, and yet remain mere stone. Something of the builders' souls was swept up to live forever among the clustered pinnacles. "It's very, very lovely," Clarissa whispered. "It makes me feel small and rather frightened." Over the dark doorways, a row of stone saints in their niches stretched across the facade. Above them a rose window stared like a cyclops's unblinking eye. Higher still, gargoyles leered sunward, keeping their ceaseless watch for devils. The cathedral was a fantasy of faith. Spirit had helped to build it no less than hands, a dream in stone on a foundation of souls. "Yes, that is beauty," Raymond said. He stepped toward the open doors. Clarissa on his arm hung back a little. She did not know why. Beauty can awe, but can it alone send a deeper prick of fear? "We are going inside?" she asked. Her husband caught the tone of her voice. He looked at her with a tinge of surprise. He would obey any wish of hers willingly. The world held nothing dearer than Clarissa. She had become even more precious in the 3 weeks since their marriage. "You'd rather not? You're tired?" Clarissa shook away her vague fears. They were a foolishness unworthy of her. Besides, Raymond obviously wanted to go in. "No, of course. We must look at it. They say the inside is even more beautiful than the outside." But as they walked about the huge, darkening place, her uneasiness came creeping back. Ethereal fears clustered within and around her, clinging but impalpable. She fastened to Raymond and his firm reality, trying to share his pleasure in the pictures, shrines, and sculptures. Together they gazed up at the huge, shining crucifix slung from the distant roof. But her mind did not follow his words as he admired it. She was thinking how quiet, how lonely it was in this great place. Here and there 1 or 2 dim figures moved silently as ghosts. Points of light shone in far, dark corners, like stars in the blackness of space. There was a sense of peace, but not the peace of tranquility. They crossed to the side chapels where Raymond took a lengthy interest in the decorations and furnishings. Some time had passed before he looked up and noticed his wife's pallor. "What is it? You're not ill, darling?" "No," she assured him. "No, I'm quite all right." It was the truth. There was nothing wrong with her, save only an overwhelming desire to get back to the familiarities of noises and people. "Anyhow, we'd better go. They'll be wanting to close the place soon," Raymond said. They returned to the central aisle and turned toward the entrance. Now that the sun had set, the western end was very dim. The lights were few and feeble, pale candles and a lamp or two. The rose window was no more than a blur, the shape of the doorway invisible. With misgiving, Raymond hastened his steps. Clarissa clutched his arm more tightly. "Surely they haven't—" He left the sentence unfinished as they both saw that the heavy doors were shut. "They must have overlooked us when we were in that chapel," he said with more cheerfulness than he felt. "I'll try knocking." But the pounding of his fists against the massive doors was childishly futile. Sledgehammer blows could scarcely have been heard through those solid timbers. Together they shouted. Their voices fled away through the empty arches. The sound, flung from wall to wall, returned to them, a distorted, eerie travesty. "Don't," implored Clarissa. "Don't shout any more. It frightens me." Raymond stopped at once, but he did not admit in words that he too had felt fearful of the echoes, as though he were disturbing things which should be left to sleep. "Perhaps there's a smaller door open somewhere," he suggested, but with little hope in his tone. Their heels clicked sharply on the flagstones as they searched. Clarissa fought down an absurd impulse to walk on tiptoe. Each door they tried seemed equipped with a more loudly clattering latch and more raucously grinding bolts than the last. A few opened, but none of these led into the open. "Locked," said Raymond disgustedly as they reached the main door once more. "Every single entrance locked. I'm afraid we're prisoners." Half-heartedly he hammered again on the wood. "But we can't stay here." There was a piteous sound in Clarissa's voice, like a child, imploring not to be left in the dark. He put his arm around her, and she pressed thankfully closer. "We must. There's no help for it. Well, after all, it might be worse. We're together and we're perfectly safe." "Yes, but... oh, I suppose it's silly to be afraid." "There's nothing to be afraid of, darling. We can go back into that little chapel and make ourselves as comfortable as we can in there. There are cushions on the benches, and we can use hassocks for pillows. Oh, we might be far worse off." Raymond woke suddenly at the slight movement of Clarissa in his arms. "What is it?" he mumbled sleepily. "Shh. Listen." She watched his face as he obeyed, part fearful lest he should not hear the sound, but in greater part hoping that he would prove it an hallucination. He sat upright. "Yes, I can hear it. What on earth?" He glanced at his watch. It showed 1:30. What can they be doing at this time? They listened in silence for some moments. the confused sound down by the entrance clarified into a chant of massive solemnity. No words could reach them, only harmony rising and falling, like the surge of long, slow waves. Raymond half rose. Clarissa seized his arm, her voice imploring. No, you mustn't, it's... She stopped, at a loss. There was no word to express her sensation, but it touched him, too, like a warning. He relaxed and dropped back to the seat. The voices approached, slowly. The chant rolled on. Occasionally it would rise from its ululation to a paean and then sink back again to its woeful monotony. The two in the chapel crept forward until only one high-backed bench hid them from the nave. There they crouched, peering out into the dimness. The slow procession passed. First, the acolytes with swinging censers. Behind them, a cross-bearer, then a single-robed figure, leading a dozen brown-habited monks chanting, their faces uncertainly lit by the candles they carried. Then the sisters of some black-robed order, their faces gleaming, white as paper out of their somberness. Two more monks, holding by ropes, a lovely nun. She was young, not ageless like the rest, but the beauty of her face was submerged in anguish. Bright tears of fear and misery poured from her wide eyes, trickling down upon her clothes. She could not brush them away nor hide her face, for her arms were tightly bound behind her back. Now and then her voice rose in a frightened call above the chanting, a weak, thin cry which choked in a tightened throat. She darted glances right and left, twisted to look behind her in hopeless desperation. Twice she hung back, writhing her arms in their cords. The two monks before her pulled on the ropes, dragging her forward. Once she fell to her knees and, with lips moving, gazed up at the immense cross in the roof. She implored mercy and forgiveness, but the tugging ropes forced her on. Clarissa turned horrified eyes to her husband. She saw that he also had understood and knew the right, which was to follow. He murmured something too low for her to catch. The deliberate procession with its spangle of candles approached the altar. Each row genuflected before it turned away to the left. Despair seemed to snap the last stay of hope in the nun as she passed it, drooping. Raymond leaned further out of the chapel to watch the file disappear into a small doorway. Then he returned to his wife and took her hand. Neither spoke. Clarissa was too deeply shocked for speech. A nun who had broken her vows. She knew the old punishment for that. They would put her... She shuddered and clutched Raymond's hand the tighter. They couldn't do that. Not now. Centuries ago, perhaps, but not today. But the thought of her own words came back to her. The past seems so close here, she had said. She shuddered again. Sounds stole out of the little door into the cathedral. A short, weak scuffle. Something between a gasp and a whimper. A voice which spoke in heavy, sonorous tones. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. A muffled clash. The ring of the trowel on the stone. Clarissa fainted. "They're gone," Raymond was saying. "Come, quickly." "What?" Clarissa was still uncertain, bemused. "Come along. We may be in time to save her yet. There must be a little air in there." He was pulling Clarissa by the wrist, dragging her after him, out of the chapel towards the small door. But if they should come back? "They've gone, I tell you. I heard them bolt the big doors." "But—" Clarissa was terrified. If the monks found out that there had been witnesses, what then? "Hurry, or we'll be too late." Raymond seized a candle from its altar and pulled at the small door. For its size, it was heavy, and swung back slowly. He ran down the curving flight of stone steps beyond, Clarissa at his heels. The crypt below was small. One candle sufficed to show all there was to see. The two side walls were smooth. It was the one opposite at which they stared. It showed the shape of two niches long filled in, 3 more niches empty and darkly waiting, and one lighter patch of new stones and white mortar. Raymond set down his candle and ran to the recent work, one hand fumbling for a knife in his pocket. Clarissa raked at the damp mortar with her fingernails. "Just enough to let us get a hold on this stone," he muttered as he scraped. He clenched his strong fingers on its edges. At his first heave it loosened. A second pull, and it fell with a thud at his feet. But there was another sound in the crypt. They whirled round to stare into the expressionless faces of 6 monks. In the morning, only one niche stood empty and darkly waiting.